Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Reddit Raisins. Today's video is on rslash. I'm currently a wife in a plural marriage in the UAE. Ask me anything. I apologize for my poor English. My first language is Arabic, and although I feel comfortable with your language, please forgive any mistakes I might make. As I said before, I'm a member of a plural marriage, and I'm the second of 3 wives, all of whom are married to a relatively wealthy Emirati businessman in Dubai. Although I live in the Emirates today, I was born and was raised in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. I grew up fairly comfortably, and since my family was of a high social status, my sisters and I all received an excellent education, especially compared to many other girls my age. A few months before my 17th birthday, my father, due to the guardian system, told me that he had arranged a marriage for me to a foreign businessman in Dubai, and that I would be married within a few weeks. Although he didn't tell me, I assumed that a combination of the marriage dowry and social connections were primarily responsible for his choice of groom. Without going into too much detail, the next few weeks were a blur of preparation for the wedding. Everything happened so fast I hardly had time to grieve or cry over the loss of my family, friends, and childhood. Finally, at the beginning of 2017, I was married to my new husband in Dubai and became his second wife. I didn't ever realize that I wouldn't be his first wife until a few days before the wedding, and I can only remember crying for an entire afternoon the day I found out I would be his second wife. It would not be until the end of last year that our husband took his third and most recent wife. Thank you again, and I again apologize for my English. Ask me anything. Edit. Sorry, I really did not expect this to be so interesting to people. I'm going to try and answer as many questions as I can. Do you feel any resentment towards your father for putting you in a situation you may not have necessarily chosen for yourself? I do sometimes. He never really gave me a choice in the matter, so I do sometimes feel resentful towards him for putting me into this situation. But it's the culture he knew growing up, and I know he had my best interests at heart. He wanted to be sure I would be provided for, and I know that despite everything he loves me and wants what's best for me. But it's not easy to forgive him. Do you get to see your parents and your family often? Or is the new family in the UAE the only folks you can see? I haven't visited with my family in person since I moved to Dubai, but they certainly could. Most of my siblings have either married or moved, so it would be difficult for them to do, but it is certainly something that I would like in the future. I've been very fortunate to find several close friends here in Dubai, and I keep in touch with my sisters and mother. Do you spend time with the other wives? Are they your friends? Or do you keep separate lives? For the most part we are like separate families. We each have our own apartment, cook our own meals, and have our own beds, but fortunately his first wife and I do get along very well. Since I left Saudi Arabia she's been almost like a sister to me. His third wife though, she is very rude to us, since she is the youngest, and we definitely don't get along. How old are his first and third wife? His first wife is 36, and his most recent wife is only 16. Even though 18 is legally the marriable age in the UAE, a judge can approve a younger marriage, and our husband is wealthy enough to ensure that it happens. Your English is outstanding. What do you think of a man in his early 50s marrying a girl of 16? Thank you. I have plenty of time to practice. I personally don't think it's right for such a marriage to take place. Even though legally it was allowed, the odds are she'll be widowed before she even turns 40, which is really tragic for her. If you were given a chance to, would you get out of the marriage? I don't think so. I don't know what I would do, or where I would go, since hardly anyone would marry a single mother, especially after a divorce. I wish it never happened, but I feel like, now that it's done, I really don't have any better choice. How common do you think polygamous marriages are among other people you know? Is it common? Do you know anyone else who shares a husband or has multiple wives? What do you think is the worst part about living in such a relationship? Thank you so much for posting. Your story is really intriguing. I personally don't know anyone else in a plural marriage, but I know they exist. I've met a few, but it's relatively uncommon for it to happen, even in the upper classes. The worst part of my relationship is probably just the stress it brings. For instance, he spends most nights with his new wife, and she knows she is his favorite right now, and uses that to treat his first wife and I very badly. I try not to hold it against her or our husband, but it's hard not to. How does she use that as leverage? What do you mean by treating you and first wife badly? It feels like, since our husband spends more time with her than the rest of us, she has a more privileged relationship with him than we do. She can get him to do things to us that he wouldn't do otherwise, like punish us for doing innocent things, like going out without his permission. He is usually fine with, but if his youngest wife convinced him to, he will get angry and even hit us, even very softly. It's more of symbolic than anything, but it still makes me feel awful. She also doesn't miss an opportunity to bring me down or insult me. Well, she's 16. She's a child and immature. She thinks she has some sort of upper hand. That'll crumble when your husband gets a fourth wife. This whole comment blows my mind, that we are discussing the immaturity of a child who is a wife of someone 40 years older, who is making the life of his first and second wives a misery. Absolutely mind-boggling that this is being discussed so casually. How has your life changed because of the marriage? Before I was married, I lived with my family, and, because of the laws in Saudi Arabia, I had very little freedom of movement, and had to ask permission to do or go anywhere. Even while I was at home, my parents, and especially my father, had absolute control over what I did. Now that I'm married, I don't have to ask permission to go out, as long as I'm accompanied by another woman or male guardian, and I have more control over how I spend the small allowance I get. I also have more freedom at home to raise our child and to talk and spend time with female friends. Despite this, if he wanted to, or if I made him unhappy with me, my husband could control me just like my father did and monitor my every move. But fortunately he allows his wives to be fairly independent, as long as we obey. What do you enjoy spending your allowance on? Well, it's usually not enough to buy anything more than the essentials, but I love cooking and buying new ingredients, and I always put a little aside to buy paints and art supplies with. I thought the guardian laws in Saudi Arabia were recently lifted. Is that true? To my knowledge they haven't been lifted, but they have been reformed in recent years. Even so, it didn't really change my situation, especially since my father was my only source of livelihood at the time, and my husband is my only source of security now. How does the person treat you? Does he treat all his wives equally, or is he biased? It depends. He treats his first wife and I pretty much the same, or at least spends the same amount of time with us. But ever since his third marriage he spent most nights with his new wife. I try not to feel jealous, but it is hard not to resent him and her for it. Don't be ashamed of feeling jealous. That's a normal reaction to this situation. You did not consent to have a husband you have to share. Thank you for your words. I know I didn't agree to the arrangement, but I know it's not the fault of his other wives, and I don't want to take it out on them. It's just something we have to live with. What would happen in the event that it is discovered you are posting on this subreddit? He probably wouldn't even understand it, since he certainly doesn't have a good grasp of social media. But if he knew I was talking about his private life, even just about myself, he wouldn't be happy. I don't know what he would do to me, but there would certainly be consequences. Like I said, I'm not too worried though. VPN and Tor or Brave browser. If you think you'd need a VPN but can't buy a reliable subscription, I'm comfortable sharing mine. Thank you for your offer, but I use a VPN. Our husband allows us all to use one, because of the internet restrictions in the country, and as long as we are responsible he doesn't mind. Although I don't think he would like me sharing this, I've been careful not to reveal anything about him, so I don't think I've done anything to betray his trust. Do you love him? Does he love you? In a way I think I love him, even though I don't think he married me for love, and I didn't have much of a choice. I've learned to love him for what he is. I know he cares for me in his own way, and I know he wants me to be happy and provided for, which I'm very thankful for. I don't think I want to, or could run away, and even if I could, I really have no way of providing for myself. He manages our finances, and I'm not sure what I could do to support my child and myself. Sorry if this is a rude question. If he were to die soon, would you still be friends with the first wife? Not a rude question at all. I think we would. Even if we didn't share a husband, I think we would have been friends anyway, and I think we would stay friends, even if we weren't married to the same man. What's the best thing about your marriage? Probably having such a good relationship with his first wife. It's almost like having another sister, and it definitely helps make up for some of the worst parts of my marriage. Either that or being provided for so well. I'm not mistreated or neglected, and it gives me a chance to raise our daughter. If you had had a son, do you think your husband would have been reluctant to marry a third wife? Or did it not? After, he must be very rich to afford 3 wives, 3 households. Are you allowed to spend any money? Do you have housekeeping help? I don't think he would have done anything differently, even if I had a son. He has 2 sons already, by his first wife, so I don't think that had much to do with it. He is, as far as I know, fairly wealthy, even though he never talks about business or finances with us. Each of us gets a monthly allowance for groceries, clothes, shopping, and anything else we might need, but it's never enough to make any really extravagant purchases. For anything like that, like jewelry or really nice clothes, anything really expensive, we have to ask him for permission. We do have housekeeping help, but it's not a large apartment, so it's quite easy to keep tidy. It gives me some extra time to shop or spend with our daughter. Thank you for answering these questions. What typically happens to the wives once their husband dies? Say you are 50. Do you get an inheritance? Where would you live? Would you need to go to family and live under the rule of a son, or brother, or cousin? Are there any options for you to be free after he dies? I would most likely be sent to live with a male relative, and perhaps receive an inheritance or something similar. I would have to follow under Sharia law, and wait before remarrying though. If I'm widowed while still young, I could probably remarry, but if I was older I might just live as a widow with my relatives. Thank you. Just a follow-up question. Would you be a revered elder if you lived as a widow with family? Can widows work and leave the house with escort? Or are you better off being married again? I would definitely be taken care of if I was too old to marry again, but otherwise I would be better off remarrying. I would probably be asked to escort the other girls if the family went going out, rather than having to ask other people. What is IDA? It's a period of time for the divorced or widowed women to go through before being able to remarry. It has a lot of certain rules to follow. A man, however, doesn't have to go through this. How old is your husband? Do you have a good relationship with him? Would you marry another person if you have a choice? Would you not be in a plural marriage if you have a choice on it? How is your relationship with the other wives? Do you guys have children? If not, would you want children? What would they call his other wives? Sorry for asking so many questions. I'm interested in your story. Have a good day. My husband is in his early 50s, and we have a fairly good relationship. Although he doesn't spend as much time with me as his new wife, he's very polite and nice to me, and doesn't mistreat me at all. At this point I can't imagine how my life would be like if I was married to someone else, but I absolutely wish that my father had allowed me to have some say in my marriage, or at least waited until I was older, so I could finish my education. I personally don't think that plural marriages are ideal, and I wish they didn't happen. But I've lived my whole life like this, and I can hardly imagine it any other way. Yes, we have one child, a beautiful 2-year-old baby girl. Normally, we call each other by our first names, or nicknames, especially his first wife and I. But formally I suppose we would call each other sister, but ordinarily we just go by a first name basis. I'm very close with his first wife, but not so much with his most recent bride. Would you prefer a different future for your daughter? Absolutely. I would never want anyone, least of all my daughter, to be in the same relationship as me. Thank you for watching my video. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like and subscribe as more videos will be coming soon. Take care and stay safe.